on a special edition of Brian Ross Investigates. Fasten your seatbelts, turbulence ahead. Airlines in an economic freefall. No one is flying. Pilots and flight attendants being furloughed or fired. We're joined by the president of the Flight Attendants Union for United Airlines. The skies are no longer so friendly.
The crisis that hit our industry has brought panic to everyone.
Plus, this week's media winners and losers. Sean Hannity.
Your message will never be heard, whoever you people are.
The White House Press Corps and Kelly Anne Conway. The editor-in-chief of Mediaite rates them all. See if you agree. Plus, your questions about COVID-19 and the law. Your job, your home, your rights.
We'd like to know what rights we have.
What do you suggest we do?
From the Law&Crime Network, this is a special COVID-19 edition of Brian Ross Investigates. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Ross, and this is a special edition of our program for the Law&Crime Network and for our viewers on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I'm joined today by my colleague at Law&Crime, Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, this week we see growing concerns and just a cascade of bad news. No fall-offs initially in the death toll from the COVID-19 illness and increasing unemployment. Now, 33 million people filing for unemployment in this country, Rhonda.
And some industries really in dire straits. For example, nobody's flying. We've seen the empty airports. Despite a $25 billion federal bailout package, the famous investor Warren Buffett has pulled all his money out of airline stocks and says he doesn't think that industry will survive.
That's a real question for the pilots and the flight attendants. ABC's Nightline talked with one pilot, Dennis Pager, as he returned to work for the first time. Here's what he told Nightline.
It's been probably over a month since I've been out flying just due to all the cancellations last minute that have happened. Definitely packing a little bit different than I normally do. 3 decades of this, and this is the first time I'm packing things like masks and extra wipes and hand sanitizer.
It's Captain Dennis Tager's first day on the job since March.
Pretty empty, no doubt.
He's traveling from Chicago to Miami, then landing in Houston, documenting his trip along the way.
It'll be a little bit harder to find food than I thought.
Giving us a first-hand account of his new reality.
In your 30-plus years, have you ever seen anything affect the industry quite like COVID-19?
Not this long and deep. I flew in 9/11 and after. I was in New York, and that was a shock on many levels and horror in an area that I don't think any of us ever imagined. This is a different shock to us. It's invisible.
And it's a sentiment shared by everyone who works for an airline. I talked earlier today with the head of the Flight Attendants Union for United Airlines, Ken Diaz. Ken Diaz, thank you so much for joining us. You were flying for business yesterday. What was it like to be in the airports and in the air?
Well, when I went into Chicago's O'Hare Airport to see an empty terminal, it was actually an eerie, frightening feeling. There were more passengers than I thought there would be on the aircraft, but considering that we're only flying 10% of our flights, it was good to see, for the first time, more passengers than employees.
For your members, the flight attendants for United, this must be a very scary time, especially with United now predicting a very, very slow recovery and an entirely different airline.
Well, I think with all the communications that are coming out from management to our employees, I mean, it's a very sobering picture that's being painted because, quite frankly, no one knows when demand is going to return. So flight attendants are afraid for their jobs. Flight attendants are afraid what the future holds. And no one can definitively answer their question because it all depends on demand and what the schedule will be come October 1st. The CARES Act does protect us until that time, but until demand comes back, there's no way to say how many employees will be needed. I mean, we know it's going to be a smaller airline industry as we start up because all the analysts are predicting that it's going to take not months, maybe years to get back to where we were. So Hopefully that will change. But until we can get more definitive answers from not only the government, but the traveling public, they have to feel safe to fly. We feel we're doing everything in our power to ensure that safety, working with the airline. I'm on calls with them every single day. But there is no way to predict the future, not knowing when demand for air travel will come back to our industry. And quite frankly, it's going to come back to the domestic operation much sooner than it comes back to the international operation.
Right. And for those flight attendants who are still working, still flying, what's it like for them up in the air now with passengers? Everyone's wearing a mask, wearing gloves?
So everyone is wearing a mask and wearing gloves. Their temperature is checked before they enter the airport, and that's for all airline workers. So we are trying to put every level of protection, not only for the flight attendants that I represent, but also for the traveling public to, now that they are required to wear a mask, that the comfort level of knowing that their safety is protected of my flight attendants and the traveling public. And it is only that confidence that's going to bring back air travel. We're still working with the government to try to see if our industry could be helped further, because we think we're a model for every industry in this country to keep people off the unemployment lines. I mean, today, 33 million Americans are out of work, and we're essential workers, and we want more testing for flight attendants as they are essential workers, so that can build the confidence level even more. But there's so much uncertainty, which is creating the angst of the flight attendants that I represent.
Absolutely. And how about the real world? Are some of your flight attendant members, have they come down with COVID-19? Are they suffering from it?
Yes. I mean, fortunately, United has had no fatalities. There have been 7 flight attendants in the industry that have passed due to COVID-19. I believe the contact initially, when the response was slow, from all factions, from the government direction, how we stem the tide of infection. And yes, we have quite a few numbers, but what I can report is half of those flight attendants that have been diagnosed and gone through the illness now have tested negative and have returned to work.
Well, that's very good news. Let me ask you this: for your,
I was going to say, even with voluntary furloughs to help the airlines, because this is a balancing act, I am trying to protect our flight attendants, while at the same time working with the airline, because we have to save the airline industry, and we're working to save United Airlines. So with that said, there are just so many unknowns that have to be on a day-by-day basis analyzed, and prudent, smart, and not panicked decisions have to be made to resurrect this industry for the protection of the flight attendants that the Association of Flight Attendants represents.
And right, let me ask you about your members now. They're going to suffer real financial hardship here. Is there a safety net for them?
So we do have contractual provisions how furloughs, involuntary furloughs would take place. But what we are in talks with the company now is to make every possible voluntary program available. I have to say that I'm so proud of our flight attendants that for the month of April, we took over half of the voluntary furlough programs offered at United Airlines as our contribution to help the airline get back on its feet, to also help other flight attendants that weren't in a position to take time off of work with no pay. So I applaud the flight attendants that were able to do that, and they numbered over 12,500 for the month of April.
Right, and they've shown real courage to go back to work, to go up in the air, not knowing exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and you have to realize these are ordinary, citizens that have families, that have children. There is an angst of not knowing their own predicament as far as their financial future. There's an angst, are they coming in contact with the virus? But I think the precautions that we have taken to protect our flight attendants, has shown a level of confidence to the traveling public. So I do believe eventually that will drive demand because people need to feel safe to get on an airplane. And I think that is one area with management that we are working hand in hand, because as long as we can save the industry, I'm also protecting jobs. And I want jobs for people to come back to that are the good jobs that we've worked decades to build.
All right. Well, Ken Diaz, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And keep in touch. And to all your members, stay safe.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, the time.
Lots of uncertainty and angst for all Americans now as this pandemic continues to sweep across the country. So coming up, your questions about COVID-19 and the law. And then the media's winners and losers. We'll talk with the editor-in-chief of Mediaite about who he thinks is doing well and who isn't. You're watching the Law and Crime Trial Network. We continue now with our special COVID-19 edition of our program. And Rhonda Schurz, as we just heard from the flight attendant and the pilot, lots of angst in that industry and all industries, really.
Well, we have a record 33 million unemployed in the country this week, and it's being compared to the Great Depression. So everywhere folks have concerns, questions, agony about their paychecks, their economic conditions.
Right, so let's get right to the questions from our viewers, joined now by Felicia Ennis of the firm Walshore Burstein and by Luigi Izzo of the Berman Law Group. Thank you both for being here. There's no legal cure for angst, Felicia, but what do you recommend to people who are really worried about what's next?
Well, Brian, what I've been addressing over the last few weeks, especially, is really what's going to happen in this next phase. You know, we've heard a lot about reopening in certain states and in other areas of the country, and people are nervous, and rightfully so, about resuming their normal work duties and functions and, riding subways and so forth and getting to work. So, we've been really, my firm has been trying to address these issues and helping businesses develop plans for reopenings. And employees have a lot of questions and, we're starting to see more answers. So that's the positive.
All right. Luigi Izzo, a question from one of our viewers who owns a hair salon about what she's supposed to do with certain rulings that she's apparently forced to require. Take a listen to her question.
My name is Charlene Pateman. I live in Putnam County, New York, and I've had a hair salon in Westchester County since 2009, which was mandated to close on March 21st due to the coronavirus pandemic. That left me and many of my colleagues without any income coming in. So I have been waiting for the stimulus check. Today's May 6th, and I haven't received that. And the website says that I'm eligible for it and that I shouldn't call, that they will send me a letter and let me know when that check is going to come. And that's the only information I can get on that. When I go to the regular unemployment page, it tells me that I have only partially submitted my claim and that I should call the claims department. And when I call the claims department, it tells me that I need to speak to someone to finish the claim and that they'll call me back, and they never call back. So this past weekend, I had some friends come and help me empty my entire contents of my salon into my garage because I'm fearful that with my lease coming up September 1st, that I'm going to get locked out of there with all of my means to make a living in there. So, I just don't know who to call anymore. I don't know where to get help. Please tell me how I'm going to secure my future after this. Please tell me where to turn.
So, Luigi, what would you say to that set of questions from her?
Well, first off, I'm very familiar with Putnam because I too live in Putnam County. Addressing the eviction part of her last part of the question, the governor, I think as of today, announced that August 20th, all evictions, including residential and commercial, are stayed. So she shouldn't fear to start pulling out all her belongings and personal items out of the store because no one can come evict you. No judge is going to give a court order. No marshal's going to come and lock your doors. What they're going to do on August 20th, we don't know. Are they going to try to give possibly grants and loans to landlords to try to subsidize the back rents that can't be reconciled after so many months of not being able to pay. Towards the workers' comp, towards the unemployment issue, she needs to keep going onto the website. She has to try to apply. There's no one she's going to be able to reach on the phone. There are several other sites that she might be able to go through to newyork.gov to see if there's some kind of paperwork missing that she might have to upload, but she's going to have to just keep going through that website. Towards the stimulus part, the irs.gov does have an actual page to see where her stimulus check is. It says get my payment. She needs to click on that. It'll tell her if there's anything outstanding. Possibly they don't have a bank account for her, which will delay it. If she didn't file her 2019 tax returns, that will delay it. She'll be in the next wave, not in the first wave. There's many factors, but she needs to go to irs.gov, get my payment, click on it, and put in her social security, date of birth, her address, and she should come up. There should be a site giving her direction after that, what to do for the stimulus check. Unemployment, she needs to continue going on that site or trying to get on the phone all day. Like we said, there's 33 to 36 million people on unemployment right now. That number is going up by the day. So that's going to be quite a feat, but they will get to you. And the good news is they will hold your place in line. So whenever she first applied, she'll be able to get checks in retrospect. However, that's not going to help her today.
All right. Thanks, Luigi. Felicia, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So, Felicia, small business owners who are now eligible to get relief have told us that they're concerned the rules for using this money is so draconian, they're worried they're going to be in more trouble when they use the money. What have you been hearing from your clients about this?
Rhonda, that's a really important question for people because these loans are getting funded as we speak. These PPP loans do have certain requirements attached to them in terms of how they need to be used. So the basic requirement is that they're supposed to be used towards payroll, and that is a requirement that at least 75% of these loan proceeds are used towards the payment of payroll expenses, and that could be any cash payroll expenses, which could include not just cash payments directly to your employees, but it could also include other benefits. So as long as small businesses are using these loans in accordance with these requirements, they should be okay in the long run in order to apply for the next step, which is the loan forgiveness. So these loans have attached to them an important feature that if they are used correctly, and the 75% does go towards using the proceeds for payroll, then these small businesses can apply for 100% loan forgiveness so that they don't have to pay back the loan at all, which is a huge benefit to small businesses who have been really hurt financially by closures and so forth. So as long as they can certify that they've used the proceeds properly, and they'll probably have to provide documentation to that effect, then these businesses should be okay. And I know that every day we're seeing more and more guidelines coming down from the SBA, who administers these loans, in terms of how the loan forgiveness is going to be calculated. So businesses really need to educate themselves and be informed of the latest guidances in terms of how they should be spending the money that they're receiving.
All right. And in fact, the Washington Post, Felicia and Luigi, reported in the last few hours that the Small Business Administration, in terms of its emergency disaster loan program, has just knocked down the cap from 2 million max to 150,000. There are just too many people applying and not enough money to go around. So, Luigi, let me follow up with you. With 33 million and more unemployed, is there a bottomless pit for unemployment compensation, or is that money going to run out too? Luigi?
There's no bottomless pit for anything. Eventually, that money will run out. I believe that's part of the reason why Governor Cuomo is always asking for the federal government to start bailing out the states. Obviously, these funds aren't limitless. We can't the states aren't printing their own money. That's through the federal government. At some point, it will run out. And the numbers aren't going down. They're continuing to go up. And what's quite concerning with the lax regulations that they put in place now, saying that if you can't find work simply for the reason of the coronavirus in some way, shape, or form, but I mean, a lot of people possibly haven't worked in a year or two, and they're now just jumping on that bandwagon and getting unemployment when otherwise they wouldn't have. So that's also overwhelming the system, and I'm worried about how we're going to be able to weed that out when we can barely get the number of claims registered.
So are those people permitted to apply for unemployment even though they haven't been working for months or years?
Well, the lax regulations aren't really specific. They say if you're able and willing to work now and cannot find work for any reason related to the coronavirus, whether a family member tested positive, you have to take care of them, you went out looking for work, you're scared to travel because of the coronavirus. There's a whole list of them, and they're very general that anyone could fall into that easily you can click on saying, yes, I'm willing to work, and yes, I'm not going to travel because I'm scared because of the coronavirus. Therefore, you technically would be eligible for unemployment, and with the vast number of people applying, there's no one getting on the phone like they used to, weeding people out that haven't worked in years, or the employer said, no, we fired them for cause. No one's checking these things. They can't even get these things signed up in time.
Yeah, lots of rules to negotiate and navigate at this time. All right. Well, coming up, more of your questions about COVID-19 and the law and the media's winners and losers. The editor-in-chief of Mediaite will be here to tell us who he thinks is doing well. See if you agree. You're watching the Law and Crime Trial Network.
Do you have any objections to us looking at everything on your phone?
In a way, she's almost a younger, more vibrant version of Shanann.
As soon as he met Nicole Kessinger, Chris wanted out.
She knew that he would always choose her.
That tells you everything you need to know about Chris Watts, is that he didn't know what it felt like to love someone. Chris's solution was to plot murder.
She had proof something else was going on.
Continuing now with our special report, and Rhonda Schwartz, let's talk for a moment about the so-called essential workers, those Americans who are modern-day heroes, braving the risks of going out in the public, including the people who have been reporters and photographers who are out there every day trying to give us an idea of what's going on.
That's right, Brian. And, you know, at a time when we need our local news more than ever before, journalists all around the country, at a time when newspapers are under siege, are putting on their masks and their gloves and going out to take the photographs and do the interviews to bring us the stories that help bring us all together. And I think we're proud to be part of the profession and proud of all our friends and colleagues that are out there on the front lines.
Indeed. In fact, this week, when the Columbia University announced the winners of the Pulitzer Prizes, the administrator, Dana Hannity, made a special point of acknowledging those journalists on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Despite relentless assaults on objective truth, coordinated efforts to undermine our nation's free press, and persistent economic headwinds, journalists continue to pursue and deliver essential facts and truths to keep us safe and to protect our democracy. They are risking and far too often losing their lives at a time when their words, their images, and their revelations are more necessary to our democracy than ever.
So let's talk about the essential workers now with our two fine lawyers, Felicia Ennis and Luigi Izzu. Let me start with you, Felicia. For people who are so-called essential workers required to be out there, what protections do they have, especially with some Republicans in Congress talking about putting a cap or a limit on liability for employers?
Yeah, so Brian, I mean, there's a lot of precautions that we want our front line workers to take in the workplace, but obviously it's a two-way street, right? So we want to make sure that not only are they taking the appropriate precautions, but that these measures are being implemented and their safety is being ensured by their employers. So there's a responsibility on both sides. And that's really what we're seeing now more and more as other non-essential businesses are opening, is what are some of not just the common sense approaches that can be taken in terms of social distancing and assessing, business operations in order to reduce transmission and protect workers in the workplace. But what could you do personally for yourself to really ensure that you're going to protect yourself when you're going out there, including on the front lines? So obviously, wearing the gloves and the face mask is very important, but you're also constantly assessing situations and trying to avoid overcrowded areas. You're trying to really make sure that whatever circumstance you find yourself in, that people are still engaging in social distancing, and that you're reminding people that you're all in this together, and that really for this ever for us to ever regain confidence again and really get out there and start reopening up America, we need to see that these precautionary measures that are there for really not just our safety, but for the safety of all of us, are not just written on a piece of paper, but are really being implemented and enforced by employers in the workplace, by state and local governments. And that's really the way forward.
All right. Luigi, a question for you sent in by one of our viewers, another owner of a hair salon who's got a question for you. Let's take a look.
Hello, my name is Wafea Abdallah, and I own Oasis Hair Salon in Rockville, Maryland. My question is about the order that came down from Governor Hogan last Monday, where it indicated that as a hair salon, you can go in and do an essential employee's hair with a letter indicating that they need their hair done for their work. Otherwise, we're going to be fined a hefty fine. So it's quite confusing, because what essential worker is it that we can do, and what must the letter say?
So, Luigi, what do you say to that? That's a complicated question. I'm not sure how to even answer that.
Well, I mean, first off, I mean, I'm not in that state, but if the governor is issuing a rule stating that you can open, but the client needs a letter stating it's for employment, you better believe you better have that letter. I don't know if you have to go so deep into it. I don't think they would say you would have to give a reason why the employer is saying that employee needs the haircut. That's a whole nother issue. But as long as she's keeping track and people are coming in and they're saying for work she needs it, which I'm sure there's plenty of places that you can't go into work with uncontrollable hair and people working in certain factories or chemical places, or even, I mean, even school. I mean, everyone's on Skype now, so I don't know. But she better make sure she has that letter. That's definitely, because if the fines that I'm hearing, I know in New York City, some people are getting fined up to $10,000. I heard of a homeowner that had someone painting their home, and they got caught painting their home during this time, and they fined the homeowner $10,000, as well as the company that came in that painted the house. So you definitely want to make sure you're complying with whatever regulations of her state. Definitely make sure you're getting that letter, and keep track of it and keep them.
All right. It's a strange world. It certainly is. Felicia, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So we're using this term essential worker all the time now. Has it become a legal definition? How do you know you're an essential worker? Is there actually like a legal definition of who is?
Well, certainly that could be state by state. So I know, for example, when Governor Cuomo put New York State on pause, there was a list of essential workers that his office published. And to the extent that your industry or business was not on this list, there was an application process that you can actually apply to be considered an essential worker, assuming that you can demonstrate to the government why your particular business needed to be open. But yes, to answer your question, Rhonda, it depends on what jurisdiction you're in, but essential workers are defined.
Luigi, we've talked before about essential workers. Should there be, or is there some program that would give them a kind of hazardous duty pay or a special bonus for working through this pandemic and serving the country so well?
Well, there should be. At this time, I'm not aware of any. I believe the Congress is probably going on the next stimulus, probably provide something like that. Obviously, these people have went well and beyond their call of duty. They are putting their lives on the line every day. I'm sure their families emotionally, every time they come home, are worried what's going on, what they're carrying back. There definitely should be something out there. Right now, I'm not aware of anything, but I'm hoping that Congress in the next stimulus package puts something together and makes it retroactive. Because doing it now and then just carrying it forward, and by the time it kicks in, really, this thing should go back since the time it started.
All right. And Felicia, final question for you. Are lawyers considered essential workers?
Not in New York State, but I do understand in some other states they are considered essential workers if they are servicing defined essential businesses. So I guess you may be, a lawyer for an airline. You could be considered essential in that regard. But otherwise, we're working from home like the rest of those who are able to. And we understand that when the state starts to reopen, we will be in, one of the first phases to reopen along with some other professional services. But as of now, I'm not defined as essential.
All right. Well, Felicia Ennis, you're essential to our good program from the Warsaw Burstein Law Group and from Luigi Izzo from the Berman Law Group. Thank you both so much for being here. Coming up when we continue, the media's winners and losers. The editor-in-chief of Mediaite is here live to talk to us about who's doing well and who's not. See if you do agree. You're watching the Law and Crime Trial Network.
Do you have any objections to us looking at everything on the phone?
In a way, she's almost a younger, more vibrant version of Shanann.
As soon as he met Nicole Kessinger, Chris wanted out.
She knew that he would always choose her.
That tells you everything you need to know about Chris Watts, is that he didn't know what it felt like to love someone. Chris's solution was to plot murder.
She had proof something else was going on.
Back now with our weekly feature with Aidan McLaughlin, who's the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, part of the Abrams Law Group, as is the Law and Crime Trial Network. And Aidan, every week, winners and losers, and quite a few to choose from this week.
Oh yeah, we've got a couple. Starting off with Mika Brzezinski, the MSNBC host.
Right. Let's take a look at what she had to do during her interview with former Vice President Biden about allegations against him.
You have said in the past that if a woman goes under the lights and talks about something like this, we have to consider that the essence of this is real. Is the essence of what she is saying is real? Why do you think she's doing this?
I'm not going to question her motive. I'm not going to get into that at all. I don't know why she's saying this.
But, Mr. Vice President, as it pertained to Dr. Ford, everyone wanted, high-level Democrats said she should be believed, that they believed it happened. You said if someone like Dr. Ford were to come out, the essence of what she is saying has to be believed, has to be real.
No.
Why?
And no, what I said, it has to be.
Why is it real for Dr. Ford, but not for Tara Reade? Are women to be believed? Are women to be believed unless it pertains to you?
So, Aidan, those were tough questions. Is that why you chose her as a winner?
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people thought that when Biden first announced that he was going to be addressing the allegations of Tara Reade, when he selected Morning Joe, that it would be a sort of soft ground for him to, basically address the allegations under light questioning from the host, because previously Morning Joe has been a sort of home turf ground for him before. But Mika Brzezinski interviewed Biden on Friday and was pretty relentless in her questioning. She particularly honed in on the contradiction between Joe Biden's comments about Brett Kavanaugh and the allegations against the Supreme Court justice and his now defense against the Tara Reade allegation. You recall back when Kavanaugh was going through the confirmation process, Biden was one of the many Democrats who came out and said that women should be believed. And his quote was specifically that the essence of what she's saying should be taken to be true. Now, he now clarifies that what he meant by that was that it was to be taken seriously, and that women for far too long were sort of dismissed out of hand without actually listening to their stories. So he, I think, managed to handle the questions quite well. But Mika Brzezinski definitely gets the win from us for just asking them in a really tough and relentless way.
And Aidan, it was interesting to me that her co-host and husband, Joe, stayed back and let her do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and I think that made sense. Mika Brzezinski has done a lot of commentary on this sort of stuff before. She was a pretty prominent voice about the Me Too movement for MSNBC when that was in its throes. So I think it made sense to have one interrogator of Joe Biden, and she did a formidable job. Joe Scarborough has had his own commentary about the situation on Morning Joe when Biden's not on the air. So we certainly get to hear his voice enough. And, Mika Brzezinski, she got praise from across the aisle. Fox News hosts like Howard Kurtz were praising her for her interrogation of Biden. So I think she did a really good job.
You also picked a loser this week in Lara Trump. Let's take a look at what she had to say and let's talk about that. Here's Lara Trump.
Well, I would think if you were being accused of something and you were totally innocent, you would go to any length possible, Judge, to try and clear your name, including allowing people to open up files like that and make sure you turned over every single leaf to prove your innocence.
And so, Aiden, why'd you choose her as a loser?
Right. So here's the thing. It's perfectly valid to hold Joe Biden to a certain standard when it comes to the allegations of Tara Reade. She has put her name on the record. She, has spoken out publicly about him. And there is a certain degree of corroboration about her claims about what she says that Biden did to her. When you talk about a bad faith attack against Joe Biden, I think people like Lara Trump, who is a surrogate for President Donald Trump, who dismissed the many allegations against Trump, saying that Joe Biden should do everything that he can, including handing over documents if he is innocent, that certainly comes off as ironic and a bad faith argument, because Trump did nothing of the sort, and his many surrogates spent a lot of time, especially during the 2016 election, smearing his accusers instead of actually trying to do the work to respect what they were saying and rebut the allegations. So it's a double standard that Lara Trump and many of President Donald Trump's surrogates are applying to Joe Biden, and they did not apply to the president.
Right. Now, you picked a winner later in the week in Sean Hannity at Fox News. Let's listen to what he had to say and then explain why you saw him as a winner. Here's Sean Hannity.
Everyone has the right to protest, protect themselves, and try to get the country open. This, with the militia look here and these long guns, no. Show of force is dangerous. That puts our police at risk. And by the way, your message will never be heard, whoever you people are. No one should be attempting to intimidate officials with a show of force. And God forbid something happens, then they're going to go after all of us law-abiding Second Amendment people.
So that was a surprise comment by Sean Hannity. At least it surprised me.
Yeah, it was quite a surprising comment. And, we might be lowering the bar a bit here for Sean Hannity. But here's the thing. It was an image of a bunch of armed protesters waving Trump flags. And Sean Hannity might be the most loyal person on cable news to President Donald Trump. And also worth pointing out that Sean Hannity is a concealed carry gun toter in the state of New York. So here he is saying that, Trump supporters who are storming these state capitals and demanding that the country reopen and protesting, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan lockdown orders, he's saying that they should be doing it without these weapons because it's intimidation and it could result in some serious problems for local law enforcement. So him pushing back on these protests is only a good thing, and it comes despite him talking out against Trump supporters and no doubt many people in his own audience. So we thought that was worthy of a win, and that's why he was our winner for I think Tuesday.
Right. And certainly there have been many times when he's been one of your losers. Were his comments here consistent with his broad view of the world, or do you think he's trying to clean up his act, as it were?
I'm fairly surprised because Sean Hannity doesn't spend a lot of time trying to clean up his act. It's not really the way he thinks. He's ardently supportive of President Donald Trump, whether or not, Donald Trump is getting a ton of criticism or is being praised. Sean Hannity, you can bet on he's saying that Donald Trump's doing the right thing. So this was surprising and a little bit out of turn, and it certainly conflicts with some of the things that Sean Hannity has been saying. He's certainly been highly critical of governors like Gretchen Whitmer and other Democratic governors who have had fairly strict lockdown measures. So while he's criticizing those lockdown measures and saying that the protests themselves are good, he's also saying that it's incredibly dangerous to have those protests be heavily armed, which is something I think we can all get behind. And Sean Hannity actually got praised by the hosts of The View for expressing that disapproval of the protesters, which is also a rare agreement between the hosts of The View and Fox News primetime host.
I'll say that is a rare one. You picked as a loser last week, or this week, Andy Lack, who was essentially the chairman of NBC News, MSNBC. Why was he a loser?
Sure. So this is a sort of really interesting industry shakeup. MSNBC and NBC and CNBC are sort of separate entities under NBC Universal. And Jeff Shell, the new CEO of NBC Universal, implemented his first shakeup as COO. He got named a couple months ago. And that involved the ouster of Andy Lack, who was reportedly planning on retiring after the election. That got moved up. He's now retiring at the end of the month. And he is going to be replaced at NBC by Cesar Conde, who is a lesser known figure in the NBC Universal universe. Now, Andy Lack is obviously the loser here because he's being ousted prematurely, also on a raft of bad press. There's been a lot of criticism of how he handled Ronan Farrow's reporting on Harvey Weinstein when it was at NBC before it went to the New Yorker, you'll recall. So he, has been criticized. There's a lot of antagonism against Andy Lack at the network. So he hasn't left on the best of terms. Also, his deputy, Noah Oppenheim, who was often pitched as a would-be successor, did not get the job. So he's, stuck still at MSNBC, and that's also considered a slight to Andy Lack. So, both him and his successor kind of got the snub this week. Whereas Cesar Conde had a pretty stellar week. He's now running NBC News, MSNBC, and CNBC for the first time. Those are all three under the same person, and he's going to be reporting to Jeff Shell.
And does it seem like time is short for Noah Oppenheim at NBC News? He's still the president there, but he didn't get the big job.
Yeah, there was some speculation in a Daily Beast report that came out this week that his days might be numbered at MSNBC. I wouldn't read too much into that. He's still running the network. And, there may be some grumbles from people, staffers at the network that are not too fond of his leadership and his tightness to Lack. But I don't think there's any sign that he's going to be ousted anytime soon. This seems like a pretty big shakeup from the COO, and I'd be surprised if there's more ripple effect.
All right. So the next winner, Mark Schuss, now named, he's back at BuzzFeed. Why is he a winner? Why are they a winner? Because they're laying off lots of people.
They are laying off lots of people. Now, I'll point out that we made Mark Schuss the winner here, not BuzzFeed News in general, because BuzzFeed is going through quite a tough time. Jonah Peretti, the COO, announced that there are going to be furloughs due to a steep decline in ad revenue during the coronavirus pandemic. But just looking at the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News, which Ben Smith built into this serious news operation with a ton of departments and some serious breaking news chops. Ben Smith left to join the New York Times a couple months ago to be the media critic for the opinion pages, and he left behind a gap at BuzzFeed News. They didn't have an editor-in-chief. Now, Mark Schuss got tapped to replace him now. He was a professor of journalism. He also had a serious run at ProPublica and other websites, and he's a consummate professional, a veteran journalist. So I think it's good news for BuzzFeed and certainly a win for the veteran journalist.
Indeed. So we've got about 30 seconds here. You picked the White House press corps as losers because they didn't really confront Kelly Anne Conway.
Sure. Now, I think this was a contentious pick. I sort of disagreed with it, but Caleb Howe, one of our editors, went forward with it as the loser of the day. The press corps didn't ask Kelly Anne Conway about the pretty brutal attacks that President Donald Trump lobbed against her husband. He called him moonface and said that he was deranged. Now, 2 hours later, the press corps had a chance to interview Kelly Anne Conway, and they didn't even ask her about that, which seems like an odd thing to miss and a real, interesting story. So there was some criticism there, and we made them loser of the day. Let's see if they step it up later this week.
All right. Well, Aidan McLaughlin, as always, great to have you on the program. Fascinating. We'll see what our viewers think about their winners and losers. Thanks again, Aidan, for being here. And thanks to all you for watching, and our guests today, Luigi Izzo and Felicia Ennis, as well as Ken Diaz. I'm Brian Ross. We'll be back here again next week. Thanks to all of you for watching and to our staff for making it happen.